to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Amanda Lamb. In today's deep dive conversation with WRAL documentary reporter and producer Cristin Severance, we're talking about fentanyl deaths, the subject of her new documentary, Crisis Next Door. More than 4,000 people in North Carolina died from drug overdoses in 2021. This is the highest number of drug abuse deaths ever recorded in our state in a single year. 77% of those deaths involved fentanyl, according to the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. Cristin, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I know in your reporting you said you feel like there's a lack of empathy sometimes when it comes to these overdoses, and that's maybe why they haven't been taken as seriously as they could have been. Why do you think there's this lack of empathy and concern, and why was it important for you to tackle this?
I mean, we know this is happening, right? Listen to the numbers you just said. More than 4,000 people overdosed and died in 2021. That's a 22% increase in the number of overdose deaths in our state. Big percentage of those deaths involve fentanyl. But in doing this documentary, I really got the feeling that people would say or think, I don't do drugs. Why should I worry about that? But here's the thing, and this is what I would say back. Every single one of us knows someone who has struggled with addiction. It could be a family member. It could be a friend. It could be someone, we grew up with. And so it's happening everywhere. It is really impacting families. It's destroying families. And that's why we wanted to do this. We wanted people to understand fentanyl, what it is, why it's so deadly, and that it is happening everywhere.
And you just mentioned, what is it and why is it so deadly? I mean, I think there's been so much talked about, so much written about. It is a little confusing. So explain to us what it is and why is it fatal so often?
Yeah, so I think we do hear about it so much, but there's so much confusion about it. So basically, fentanyl is an opioid. And what that means is, it's a painkiller in its pharmaceutical form. When it's produced by pharmaceutical companies and approved by the FDA, it's used for acute and chronic pain. Okay. But when we're talking about fentanyl from an overdose perspective, we're talking about illicit fentanyl. And so this is fentanyl that's produced by drug cartels and it's used for money-making purposes, not for healthcare. And many experts say that a very small amount can lead to death. So as little as 2 milligrams can kill you. And so my big question, to all of the experts I interviewed that I could never understand is, well, if 2 milligrams could kill someone, why is it in these drugs? Why would the cartels or a drug dealer who's trying to make money put it in drugs if it could kill their customer? And the answer is that this is all about business. So fentanyl is cheap to produce. And if you can put just a tiny amount of something and produce a big high, then you can obviously, make a lot more money.
Quantify 2 milligrams for me. I mean, just because I'm trying to picture it. Is it like a couple of grains of salt? I mean, what does it look like?
It's a great question. So the end of an ink pen, if you could imagine, a substance on the end of an ink pen or a pencil, that's 2 milligrams.
And so basically, it seems like it would be almost impossible for drug dealers to be able to know for sure if they've put an equal amount in whatever they're distributing that wouldn't kill somebody. There's just no way to know that.
Right. This is not being done in a lab. This is not being done, in some setting where you can, have measurements and no, not at all. This is illicit fentanyl, being made to make money.
What are doctors saying about this? And I would imagine pharmacies as well, because they're distributing the legal version, the prescribed version, but then there's this other version that's killing people. Right. And that is two separate issues. I do also think it's important to point out, where this is coming from. A lot of people ask, okay, where is this coming from? When it first started, it was being flown over from China. And now it's really coming, again, from the cartels, being driven across the border from Mexico. Fentanyl is 50 times more potent than heroin.
And again, just a little bit is very powerful. With heroin, you had to actually grow plants to a certain amount of mass, and it was harder to get across the border. Well, now all these, agents have told me you don't have to do that with fentanyl. And so again, it's being put in all sorts of drugs, heroin, cocaine, marijuana, pills. People don't know what's in there, and they're doing drugs sometimes for the first time and dying. But you also mentioned drug companies. And they do have a part in this too, right? Like they are a big part of the conversation. And so basically there were 3 waves of this opioid epidemic. The first wave from 2000 to about 2010 had to do with pills, prescription pills. And I'm sure you reported on this, during your time reporting. Drug companies were aggressively promoting pills to prescribers, saying they're safe, effective at treating pain, and not addictive. Well, we now know none of that was true. And so millions of Americans got hooked on these pills, and the companies made billions of dollars, so much money. So when the pills became less available, people started transitioning to using heroin, buying it on the street, because heroin was cheaper than the pills. And now this third wave has to do with fentanyl, which is even cheaper than heroin.
And I know you spoke to many families. There are so many heartbreaking stories, and we're going to talk about that when we come back from the break. We'll be back after the break with more from Cristin Severance about what North Carolina is doing to try and break this overdose cycle. And we'll also talk about some of those personal stories. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm talking with WRAL documentary reporter and producer Cristin Severance about what our state is doing to combat fentanyl deaths and what some of these families, these heartbreaking stories of the families that you talk to.
Oh, Amanda, this was so sad. We interviewed several different sets of parents who all lost children to fentanyl. None of them know each other. But one couple, Will and Diane Stevenson, they live in Apex, parents to 5 boys, really involved family. All the kids played sports. This is just great people. And 2 of their sons, sadly, struggled with addiction. So William is the oldest. This was an 11-year struggle. Okay. This was in and out of rehab, jail, back with his parents. Started with pills, went on to heroin, but this was a long journey with his parents. Parker, their middle son, struggled with substance abuse, but his parents said his situation was different. He was never in trouble. Then he got married. His wife's 5 months pregnant. He was ready for rehab, this 90-day program. So they get a call one night. Some of their other family members are over, and Diane, the mom, runs in and says, my son is dead. And everyone thought it was William, but it was Parker. And, obviously, tragic story, really destroyed the family. And they thought William might finally get the help he needed. But a few years later, he died as well. Both fentanyl overdoses.
And as you said, there's the people who don't know it's in the drug. And then there's people
right.
that, may consciously pursue it because of the high.
Right.
This is a nationwide problem, obviously. This is not unique to North Carolina. But is there anything going on here in our state trying to help with this crisis?
Yes. We do a lot of different stories. And sometimes I'll sit down with you and I'll sit down with lawmakers, or I'll sit down with law enforcement, and maybe they're not taking the problem that seriously, or maybe we have to bring them a problem. They know. Every person I interviewed for this documentary told me this is a major problem. And there are several things happening. One, there's this big effort to break up drug trafficking rings. And so one way to do that is to prosecute, the dealers selling fentanyl. So if someone sells drugs laced with fentanyl and someone dies, those people are getting charged and going to prison. We interviewed 3 families for the documentary, and in all 3 cases, someone was arrested and charged. So that's one way that they're really trying to break up these rings.
And is there anything we can do? Is there anything, parents can do? or us as community members can do?
I mean, I think talking about it, right? Learning about it, talking to your kids, and just educating yourself. I mean, there are this is such a sad topic, but there are things that are hopeful. I mean, the drug companies we talked about, they are getting fined, billions of dollars for their role in this. Our state, North Carolina, will receive $1.4 billion in a big settlement. And that money will have to go to people struggling with addiction and go to harm reduction and recovery services. We get into that in the documentary. So there is hope. But I think we just have to know about this and learn about it and care about it. Don't hide from it.
And I wonder, is there any argument to be said for, some states have legalized marijuana, and in those states, people buy it from a dispensary. They don't buy it off the street. Is there any argument that's saying, hey, if at least from that standpoint, if we did that, we would have a safer alternative for people that are looking for drugs on the street?
I mean, that is a really interesting question. But with this, again, it's that illicit fentanyl, right? It's the fentanyl that is being made for like illegal purposes to be put in drugs to make them more potent.
And multiple drugs, obviously, not just marijuana.
Right. But I mean, it's such an interesting question. And there's so much to this, Amanda.
So many layers. Okay. Where and when can people watch Crisis Next Door?
Okay. So the documentary is airing Wednesday night, 7:30 on WRAL, and also at 730WRAL.com. You can find it on our website by searching Crisis Next Door, or you can go to the documentaries tab. You can also find it on our WRAL documentary YouTube page.
Cristin, thank you so much for your important reporting on this really critical issue that we all need to be aware of. And thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and making us part of your morning routine. If you like what you're hearing, please rate us on Apple Podcasts or on whatever podcast app you use. Another great way to get WRAL news in the morning is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email waiting in your inbox every morning with triangle news events and headlines to get you ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.
Leave a comment and share this video with your friends. With daily uploads, there will always be a conversation.